Today I'm going to be talking about the Canon 55 to 250mm lens. Now, this lens is one of Canon's more budget style lenses, yet has quite a lot of features which you'd see on high-end cameras in a more budget style body, and generally more easy to understand for beginners and amateurs, which this lens is kind of designed and aimed at. Nowadays you can get this lens for very cheap. I was able to get mine used second-hand, as you can see from some of the use on it. However, the lens itself, the glass and everything is in very good condition, and some of the features such as image stabilization and autofocus, as well as a manual focus, is the better features that come with it, especially that image stabilization, which you only rarely see on the higher end lenses. The Canon 70 to 300mm, which this lens is often compared to, falls out on some of those features, having no image stabilization and a very slow autofocus. And this is why many people would suggest this lens over the Canon 70 to 300mm, due to the fact that it has the image stabilization which you'd really need at the longer lengths of this. And yet, although it might be made out of plastic more with a plastic base and with no real metal going around it, it is still so much better in the actual quality of the images that you can get out, and how well it can perform in quick tasks. Say you're shooting fast-paced long range, it can pick up the pace and perform a lot better than that lens, despite it being in the more budget style. You can pick up in the used market this lens compared to the 70 to 300mm for around the same price, and I feel like that's where the 70 to 300 kind of has its market. It's made of this metal. And is a lot more of a premium design over actual functionality of the lens. You do get that 300mm, yet you do get the downsides from that are quite obvious. I'll show you a few videos here, and I'll link them in the description that actually compare these lenses properly, whereas I'm not going to be doing that. I'm just going to be showing off this lens now. Of course, this is a much older lens, and the one I have is actually one of the original styles without the STM autofocus, but it was much cheaper than the newer version, so I just thought I'd go with that as I wouldn't be missing much. So this lens here is old, and a lot of the reviews are from years ago. However, it really still holds up in this day and age and can be used for some amazing shots if you can really get to it. I've been using this lens for about a week now, and factors like the image stabilization, like I've said, work tremendously on this and really steadies out your image, especially for videography, where something like the lens that I'm using now, which does not have image stabilization, really falls back, and even ones on tripods can be very stuttery and the image can move a lot, whereas with this it works to pull out those without having to edit them later on. The autofocus on this lens is loud, but that's mainly because I don't have the STM version and I just have the original version. But for most videography work, you'd be having an external mic that'd be connected to something and not directly and not using the mic from inside the camera, so it shouldn't pick it up as much. Like here now, this lens here, you can't hear any of the focusing because I'm using an external mic. Now that's actually enough rambling, so let's actually get into some of the aspects about this lens and why I think it's good quality for the price that you're paying. Now, this lens of course goes from your 55 up to 200mm, which is a long focal range for something of this price. It's a standard telephoto, and you might see these in a lot of higher qualities, the same kind of distances and ranges, going from this smaller to around about 200, 300. So it's a very common focal range to get in your telephoto lenses. But this one I feel like is one of the more budget friendly, and of course is a Canon lens, so it's, you know, it's going to work with your Canon camera, and you know that a lot of the features are going to be present and working, and you know that the quality is going to be high from a company like this. Some features like the focusing do zoom in when you try focus. As you can see, the lens actually does come out when you're focusing. That was compared to the actual zoom range of the lens, which goes up around here. This does add on quite a bit to the actual length, and so when focusing you do zoom in a bit. which some may find annoying, especially when you are doing videography. Now, this lens isn't always future-proof, of course. It's something to begin with what you're doing. I think it is a great purchase. I'm going to show some photos that I have taken with this lens within the past week. I haven't actually done any video with this lens yet, as I'd rather just practice with a actual photo taking at the moment. Hopefully later down the line on the channel you should be able to see this lens in action, actually, you know, being used for video, and I'll tell you if it does, so you can relate back to this video if you are wanting to buy it. Now, this lens has a minimum focus of 1.1 meters, as you're probably not able to actually read here from this distance, but it is quite a far reach, so it's definitely not a macro by any means, and that's, you know, why it's telephoto. It's meant for your longer ranges, capturing some animal photography. Of course, having a lens like this is not far enough for actual bird photography, especially if they're flying. It's more of your simpler kind of telephoto lenses. So simple indoor sports, wildlife that is a lot slower, maybe outside closer ranges that you can get close to. It is great for something like that, and as you can see probably on the screen now, some of my images that are like that are what I'm saying. Most of them are on the ground, and a lot of them are in a range to be able to walk to, and that's kind of what you need to keep in mind. You're not going to be able to take something from hundreds of meters away. It's going to be something close enough that you could get to usually, but they might move or get away from the position that you want, and so you just want that extra zoom just to be able to get close to them and make it actually feel like you're there with them. Now, like I said, this lens does have a plastic mounting base, which is a bit of a downside, and of course you do usually want to see a metal one so that it might not break when taking it off and putting it on. Although that is a very low chance of happening, it's still something that people want, and it makes the lens look a lot more premium. Definitely this weight is not going to be falling off of your camera. I'm going to put up some specs of the lens now, show you the weight of it and how it actually might feel on your camera. I'm using a crop sensor here, an APS-C sensor. It's the Canon 200D, so a lot of my pictures might be a bit more zoomed in than if you're using a full sensor, and if you're using something even smaller than mine, you'll have a lot more of a crop factor, so it could actually look more zoomed in. My equivalent millimeters is around 400 at full zoom instead of 250, and so keep that in mind when doing it, because if you do have a full sensor camera, then something like this will be a lot more zoomed out, and you're probably looking for the more close to 500 millimeters, which is getting into the more pricier range of lenses. Now, this lens can be picked up for around 75 to 80 pounds, if you can keep up, and especially on bids on places like eBay, can go for a lot cheaper, especially just close to that 50 to 55 mark. So you're not getting a big difference in the price range from what you can buy now to if you're, looking out for this deal. However, it might be enough for if you're starting out, that something like that can be a big difference, and so you might want to keep your eyes on deals for something like this lens. For mine, I waited around about 3 weeks to get mine for a good deal, and it came used, of course, but it had both lens caps on the front and back and a lens hood to go with it, so I don't think overall that was bad for the original style of this lens. So now that you guys know a little bit more about this lens, and before my camera actually dies, I hope this is a little bit more informational than some of my other videos, and hopefully I've either convinced you or taken you away from getting this lens, because it's all about information at this point. In my own opinion, I would suggest this lens. I think it's great for someone on a budget and someone starting out. It's very user friendly, and I think some of the features don't need, and there's not a lot of buttons and extra features that you have to work around. It's quite literally put it on, and you can see as it changes, it's all very simple, and you can get straight into shooting really. But then again, there are features like the plastic base, the fact that it is an older lens. It's not the highest quality. Of course, you're going to get Canon L glass, which is going to be a lot higher quality than something like this, but for someone on a budget, it's nothing you can't look past. The plastic body does make it lighter, so carrying it around portability wise is very easy, but someone doesn't always want something like that. You want something that is built to overly last a long amount of time, which something like this may not be unless you're taking very good care of it. So overall, I would say if you're wanting something to begin with, something light, something portable, something you know you're going to keep in good condition, this is great. However, the fact that it's unwater sealed, focusing can zoom in quite a bit, and the fact that it's a full plastic body with a plastic mount can mean that something a little bit more expensive, especially if it's in your budget, will be a better pick and can last, you know, but it can be a lot more future proof than something like this. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.